Viktor Orlov sat in Malcolm Hayes' barber chair, touched Malcolm's bruised cheek, and ordered him to pick up the $20 bill among the hair. Andre stood pinned beside the broom closet by Mikhail Petrov. Two old customers stared down as a mother held her son by the locked door. Viktor smiled because Malcolm was outnumbered and protecting too many people to fight back. He called him a barber with borrowed courage. Malcolm bent slowly, but watched the back mirror, where he could see the alley door, the dead camera, and Mikhail tightening his grip on Andre. Then Viktor noticed the old Navy SEAL photograph beside the mirror. His smile vanished. He read the faded words beneath it, Raven 2, and stepped back before anyone knew why. Sergei Antonov saw the same face and whispered, "Viktor, leave." Viktor ordered Andre dragged closer instead. Malcolm folded the bill once and saw Viktor glance toward Leo Markham's coat pocket. The missing drive was seconds from exposure. The child had begun to cry, and the man who believed Malcolm was broken had just locked himself inside the wrong room. If you enjoy stories where arrogant criminals discover too late that they chose the wrong victim, leave a like, subscribe to Wrong Victim Stories, and tell us what city or state you are watching from. Now let's go back to the moment they made their first mistake. 12 hours earlier, Malcolm Hayes opened Hayes Son Barbershop at 7 sharp, as he had every Saturday for 11 years. The old coffee pot hissed beside the register, clippers charged beneath the counter, and sunlight crossed 4 red chairs scarred by decades of work. Malcolm checked the front lock, alley latch, basement door, and camera above the waiting bench. Most people called it a shopkeeper's caution. Andre called it his uncle being impossible about details. Neither knew the whole truth. Andre Hayes arrived 3 minutes late with breakfast in one hand and an apology ready. At 17, he was tall, proud, and determined to learn the trade without admitting how much Malcolm's approval mattered. Malcolm pointed at the clock, and Andre reached for the broom. Excuses cost words. Responsibility cost movement. By 8, Mr. Ellis was arguing with the radio. Bernard Cole was correcting baseball statistics, and Tasha Green had brought 8-year-old Jamal for a cut. Jamal hated Clippers, but trusted Malcolm, who remembered every child's name and never raised his voice when trouble entered the room. Trouble had been moving along the block for a month. Envelopes disappeared into gray coats, windows broke after owners refused new security fees, and businesses began closing before dark. Nobody said extortion around children. Malcolm called it pressure, and he knew pressure moved toward anyone who refused to look away. Calvin Price entered after 10 and, for once, said almost nothing. He owned the electronics shop 2 doors down and had installed Malcolm's cameras. Pale plaster dust marked his sleeve, and he glanced at the camera before warning that dangerous men might come asking questions. Malcolm asked who they were. Calvin only said, "Don't be proud tonight," then left toward the alley instead of his own shop. Andre asked whether Calvin was okay. "No," Malcolm said, "and we just asked." "You got a minute?" Calvin said. "Chair's open." "Not for a cut." Malcolm draped a clean towel over the counter and waited. Calvin glanced toward Andre, who was showing Jamal how to sweep hair into a neat line. "Some men may come asking questions," Calvin said. "Best thing is answer quick. They aren't local kids playing hard." "Who are they?" Calvin rubbed the heel of his hand against his mouth. "People who don't like being made to repeat themselves." "That what they told you?" Calvin's eyes lifted for half a second. The shame in them answered before his mouth did. "I'm telling you as a friend." Malcolm nodded once. "Then tell me the rest." But Calvin had already stepped backward. "Just don't be proud tonight." He left without touching the coffee, and through the front glass, Malcolm watched him turn not toward his own shop, but toward the alley. Andre came beside him. "He okay?" "No," Malcolm said. "Should we ask?" "We just did." At noon, Malcolm opened the drawer beneath his station and saw that his silver straight razor case had been placed backward, hinge facing out. He had set it hinge in that morning. The cash, clippers, spare keys, and razor were untouched. Whoever searched the station had restored everything except the one detail a barber reached for without looking. He studied the mirrors before opening the case. The front glass, waiting bench, alley slice, and camera light all appeared ordinary. Inside the case lay only the cleaned razor and his grandfather's paper label. The search had been for something small enough to hide beside them. Malcolm returned the case to its proper direction and called Detective Renee Walker. Walker knew him as both a shop owner and the man who cut her father's beard. She answered, "Appointment or trouble?" Malcolm said people had been visiting businesses. Walker replied that nobody would make a statement. "Maybe they don't know what statement to make yet," he said. When she asked whether he had been threatened, he told her the shop stayed open until 6. It was not the answer she wanted, but it told her to pay attention. At 2:15, Leo Markham entered in a brown coat too heavy for July and asked Malcolm for a cleanup, though Andre's chair was open. Sweat gathered above his lip while a dark sedan passed the shop twice. Malcolm asked whether he needed to say something. Leo whispered no. "Then stop trying," Malcolm said. Near the back sink, Andre saw Pavel Sorin enter through the alley with a split lip and one side of his jacket held closed. Pavel crossed behind the chairs as if heading to the restroom. In the mirror, Malcolm and Andre both saw his hand slip beneath Leo's cape for less than a second. Pavel continued out the back. Leo's right fist closed around a small black drive. Andre started forward, but Malcolm stopped him with a tiny shake of the head. Leo hid the drive inside his coat and protested that he did not know Pavel. "Nobody asked," Malcolm said. When Leo insisted he did not know what the object was, Malcolm answered, "Then don't describe it." The sedan stopped at the corner. Police sirens sounded near the rail yard later, and Walker texted that Pavel had been found badly injured. Leo remained in the waiting area long after his haircut, clutching his coat. By 4, Mr. Ellis had returned for forgotten glasses. Bernard claimed he wanted the end of the game, and Tasha waited with Jamal for a late ride. Nobody seemed eager to step outside. Malcolm considered closing early, sending people through the alley, or calling Walker to collect Leo. Each option moved danger without controlling it. A dark sedan and black SUV watched the block, and the backward razor case proved someone had searched before Pavel arrived. The crew did not yet know whether Leo, Andre, or Malcolm held the drive, but somebody with access to the utility passage and cameras had shaped the shop in advance. Malcolm sent Andre to the basement with a coded request to check a non-existent blue box. Andre returned and said the shelf had fallen against the door. The old coal exit was blocked from outside. At 5:12, the camera light died without the backup warning Calvin's system normally displayed. Calvin's security gate was down next door, though his sign still read, "Open." Then the black SUV rolled toward Hayes and Son. The first man through the front door was Mikhail Petrov. He was younger than the others, square through the chest, with a close-cut beard and the impatient eyes of someone who experienced every delay as disrespect. He did not look at the price board, the empty chair, or the customers. He looked at hands. Malcolm's hands, Andre's hands, Leo's hands. Then he turned the deadbolt and stood with his back against the glass. Sergei Antonov entered next. He was past 60, silver-haired, carefully dressed, and moved with the economy of a man who had survived by letting younger men make the first mistake. His gaze traveled through the mirrors rather than across the room itself. For one brief moment, Malcolm felt the pressure of being evaluated by someone who understood reflections. Sergei noticed the alley slice in the back mirror and shifted 2 inches so he would not appear in it. That told Malcolm more than a weapon would have. Viktor Orlov came last. He was not physically imposing. He wore a dark suit without a tie, polished shoes, and a thin watch that probably cost more than the shop's yearly insurance. He entered as though the room had been waiting for him. The cruelty in his face was not anger. Anger could lose control. Victor's cruelty was arranged. He liked witnesses because fear became more valuable when other people carried it home. "Mr. Hayes," Victor said. Malcolm switched off his clippers. "Shop closes at 6. Then we are early." A fourth man remained outside near the SUV. Through the wall mirror, Malcolm saw him take position where he could watch both the front door and the mouth of the alley. Not local muscle, a perimeter man. Victor had arrived expecting movement. Andre stepped away from the sink. Mikhail caught him by the shoulder and drove him back against the broom closet hard enough to rattle the mops. Tasha stood, pulling Jamal against her. Mr. Ellis began to rise from his chair, but Sergei placed one palm on the chair back and gently pressed it down. "Please remain comfortable," Sergei said. Comfort left with your manners, Mr. Ellis muttered. Malcolm looked at him. Just once. Mister. Ellis read the warning and went silent. Victor smiled. You have loyal customers. They paid for haircuts. Loyalty is usually a billing arrangement. Victor walked to the register and tapped the side with one finger. You were visited this week about a neighborhood security contribution. No one spoke to me. That is strange. We spoke to everyone. Maybe nobody thought I needed security. Mikhail shoved Andre harder. He thinks this is funny. No, Victor said. He thinks calm is the same as power. Malcolm kept his eyes on Victor, but tracked Mikhail in the mirror. The younger enforcer's right shoulder rose before every shove. His breathing was fast. He was not enjoying control. He was trying to prove he had it. Sergei, by contrast, had moved where he could watch Leo without appearing to watch him. Victor stayed near the center because he expected the other men to become walls around him. Hierarchy. Impulse on the left, memory on the right, ego in the middle. What do you want? Malcolm asked. A small object passed through your business today. Hair passes through all day. Victor looked around at the customers, inviting them to share his amusement. Nobody did. A black storage drive, he said. It contains records stolen from people who take privacy seriously. A confused man carried it through your back door. Another confused man received it in that chair. Leo made the mistake of looking toward the chair where he had been cut. Sergei saw it. Malcolm saw Sergei see it. Victor turned slowly toward Leo. Mr. Markham, you stayed for a long time after your haircut. Leo's mouth opened, but no sound came. Malcolm lifted a towel from the counter and folded it. People stay here. Not tonight. Victor's attention returned to him. Tonight they learn that your hospitality has a cost. He nodded to Mikhail, who released Andre only to snatch the phone from the boy's back pocket and throw it against the tile. The screen cracked. Jamal flinched at the sound. Tasha whispered for him to look at her, not the men. The child's eyes stayed on Malcolm. That was the moment Malcolm accepted that the shop had become a hostage room. Until then, the men could have pretended they were conducting a search or collecting money. Breaking the phone, locking the door, and controlling the civilians changed the legal shape of everything. It also changed Malcolm's priorities. The drive mattered because it could expose the crew, but evidence came after life. Andre first, Jamal and Tasha second, Mr. Ellis and Bernard third, Leo, frightened enough to make dangerous choices, fourth. Malcolm put himself last because that was where he could be most useful. Victor told Sergei to search the waiting area. Mikhail emptied Andre's pockets. A transit card, $9, a comb, and a small screwdriver hit the counter. Andre's face burned with humiliation. Malcolm knew that expression. The boy was not planning to surrender. He was planning to choose a moment. That could get him killed. Eyes on me, Malcolm said. Mikhail turned. You giving orders? Talking to my nephew. Victor walked to Andre and examined him as if assessing cheap merchandise. 17. Andre said nothing. Old enough to understand consequences. Young enough to believe his uncle can prevent them. Victor patted his cheek. Andre jerked away. Mikhail grabbed the back of his neck. Malcolm's jaw tightened. It was the only visible response he allowed. Victor noticed. There. That is the real man. Not the patient barber. Not the neighborhood father. The animal underneath. You came for a drive, Malcolm said. Look for it. We already did. The words landed softly, but Malcolm felt them connect to the silver razor case. Victor knew the station had been searched. He wanted Malcolm to know too. That meant the earlier search had failed, and Victor believed the drive might now be hidden somewhere new. Sergei moved behind the counter and opened drawers. He handled objects carefully, leaving little disturbance. Mikhail pulled towels from shelves and kicked open the cabinet beneath the sink. The men did not know a barber station well enough to distinguish storage from ritual, but someone had given them a map. Sergei checked the camera monitor without asking where it was. Mikhail went directly to the basement door. Calvin had not merely surrendered a password. He had explained the shop. Camera went out, Bernard said, his voice thin. Victor glanced up. Very observant. My daughter watches that camera from home sometimes. Not tonight. Bernard's face changed. Malcolm understood why. Bernard had just told Victor someone might notice the feed was dead. Mikhail understood too. He stepped toward the old man. Leave him, Malcolm said. Mikhail smiled. Or what? Malcolm did not answer. Silence denied Mikhail the contest he wanted. The young enforcer raised his hand anyway, but Victor stopped him with a small gesture. Mr. Hayes knows what happens next, Victor said. He gives us the drive. He gives us the names of anyone who touched it. Then perhaps this remains a story about broken furniture instead of broken people. Malcolm looked at Leo in the wall mirror. Leo's coat pocket bulged slightly where the drive rested. Sergei was 3 feet away. Andrei saw it too and shifted his body to block the angle. Brave, Malcolm thought. Too obvious. Sergei's gaze moved from Andrei to Leo, then to Malcolm. Something like curiosity entered his expression. Victor took off his coat and laid it across the back of Malcolm's chair. Sit me down, he said. Malcolm did not move. I have never had a haircut in a room where everyone was so interested in the result. You don't need a cut. I need a demonstration. Victor sat and opened his hands. Your customers believe this is your room. Your nephew believes you can protect him because your name is on the glass. I want them to see ownership correctly. Mikhail forced Malcolm behind the chair and shoved clippers into his hand. The cord dragged across the floor. Malcolm could have used the movement. Mikhail was close, off balance, and more interested in Andrei's reaction than Malcolm's hands. Sergei was separated by the counter. Victor's throat was exposed above the collar. Malcolm set the clippers down. That choice confused Mikhail more than resistance would have. Pick him up. No. Mikhail struck him across the mouth. The blow turned Malcolm's head and opened the inside of his cheek against a tooth. Andrei lunged. Sergei intercepted him with one arm and pinned him against the broom closet while Mikhail pressed Malcolm's shoulder down. Jamal began crying. Tasha whispered, Please don't do this in front of him. Victor watched Malcolm straighten. Men like you build rooms where people call you sir, he said. You remember children, pour coffee, settle little arguments. Then you begin believing respect is something you own. It is not. Respect belongs to whoever can remove it. Blood warmed Malcolm's tongue. He looked at Andrei, not Victor. Breathe. Andrei's chest was heaving. He forced one breath slower. Good, Malcolm said. Victor's smile narrowed. You are still teaching him. Always. That answer irritated Victor. He lifted a $20 bill from his wallet, held it above the hair on the floor, and let it fall. Then teach him this. Men who cut hair should not pretend they can protect a block. Pick it up. No one moved. Pick it up, Malcolm. Mikhail twisted Malcolm's arm behind his back. Pain traveled through the shoulder in a clean line. Malcolm let the line exist without following it. 22 years earlier, Dante Brooks had taught him that pain was information before it was suffering. Name where it is. Name what it changes. If it changes nothing yet, do not spend fear on it. Malcolm lowered himself toward the floor. The shop saw a broad-shouldered black man being forced to kneel in his own business. Andrei saw his uncle accept humiliation. Victor saw victory. Only Malcolm saw the room continue to reveal itself. In the back mirror, the alley door remained unguarded for 3 seconds each time Sergei crossed to search a cabinet. The camera wire had been cut at the network junction, not at the camera, which meant the local recorder under the register might still be storing sound. Mikhail's grip weakened whenever Victor spoke because he wanted to watch his boss. Leo's coat pocket sat inches from a seam in the waiting bench where the upholstery had torn. Tasha had shifted Jamal behind the heavy chrome base of the third chair without being told. Then Victor looked past Malcolm and saw the photograph beside the rear mirror. The picture showed 8 men on a dock beside a dark-hulled ship, their faces tired, their uniforms salt-stained, their expressions caught between relief and grief. Malcolm stood near the end, 20 years younger, one hand resting on Dante Brooks's shoulder. Beneath the frame, on a strip of faded tape Andrei had found in an old box, were 2 handwritten words. Raven 2. Victor's shoe moved backward. It was less than half a step, but in a silent room it felt like a confession. Malcolm saw the recognition before Viktor concealed it. Sergei followed his gaze, studied the photograph, and lost color around his mouth. "Viktor," Sergei said softly, "we should finish elsewhere." Viktor stood too quickly. The barber chair rotated behind him. He looked at Malcolm on one knee, then at the younger face in the picture, trying to force the two men apart in his mind. "What is Raven 2?" Andre asked. Nobody answered him. What happened next would later be remembered on the block in one blunt sentence. Russian Mafia boss mocked a black barbershop owner. One old seal photo made him step back. But in that moment there was no story, no title, and no promise that anyone would survive to tell it. There was only Viktor's fear becoming more dangerous because it had been seen. He ordered Mikhail to pull Andre closer. Sergei whispered that they should leave. Viktor locked the second bolt instead. Then his eyes flicked toward Leo's coat, and Malcolm understood the drive was about to be exposed. Malcolm picked up the bill, folded it once, and slipped it into his shirt pocket. Viktor frowned. "What are you doing?" "Keeping the shop clean." It was the first thing Malcolm had said that sounded almost like defiance. Mikhail tightened his hold on Andre. Andre looked terrified, but his breathing remained slow. Viktor stepped near the photograph again without turning his back on Malcolm. "When was this taken?" "Long ago." "Where?" "Near water." Sergei muttered something in Russian. Viktor snapped at him to speak English. "I saw a copy of this image," Sergei said, "years ago, in a file." "What file?" Mikhail asked. Sergei did not look away from Malcolm. "A federal discovery package, from the case against Alexei Orlov." At the name, Viktor's control cracked for the length of a blink. Alexei was his older brother, the man who had built the family's offshore routes and then vanished into federal custody after a protected witness was taken from a vessel no one was supposed to reach. The extraction had broken more than a prosecution. It had exposed shell companies, safe ports, paid inspectors, and names powerful men had assumed would remain underwater forever. Viktor had been 23 when it happened. Sergei had been old enough to understand the operation's precision. A witness guarded on a moving ship had disappeared without a firefight spreading to the crew. Evidence had arrived in federal hands. Alexei had been arrested 48 hours later. In the criminal world, the story became a warning about a call sign whispered over dark water. Raven 2. Mikhail looked from the picture to Malcolm and laughed because he did not know what else to do. "This barber?" Sergei's answer was immediate. "Do not touch the boy again." The room changed. Not control, not yet, but confidence. Sergei no longer believed violence would make Malcolm predictable. Viktor no longer believed the walls contained only civilians. Mikhail, sensing fear above him, became eager to prove fear unnecessary. He jerked Andre away from the closet and pressed a forearm across his chest. "Old pictures don't make old men dangerous." "No," Malcolm said. "Choices do." Viktor moved close enough for Malcolm to smell mint on his breath. "Did you take my brother?" Malcolm's eyes rested on him. "I brought somebody else home." The distinction hit Viktor harder than a confession. Malcolm had not framed the mission around Alexei's loss. He had framed it around the witness's survival. Rescue, not revenge. That was the mind Viktor remembered from reports he had read in secret. The operator who ignored bait, bypassed ego, and kept moving toward the person who had to leave alive. Viktor slapped Malcolm. This time the blow was not a performance. It was personal. "Did Dante Brooks come home?" Viktor asked. Malcolm went still. Sergei closed his eyes for half a second, as if Viktor had touched a wire he had been warned not to touch. Dante's name had not been visible in the photograph. Calvin could not have supplied it. The name came from the old file, which meant Viktor had studied more than the consequences of Alexei's arrest. He had studied the cost. Malcolm looked at the photograph. "No." "Then perhaps you are not as good at rescue as the stories claim." Andre saw pain cross Malcolm's face, not the pain from the slap, but something deeper and older. It vanished almost immediately. Yet Viktor had found the wound he wanted, and he leaned into it. "You save one witness, lose one friend, leave your uniform, and come here to sweep hair." Is that the heroic version? Malcolm said nothing. You hung the picture where children could admire you, but you never told them what happened after. I hung it because Andre asked. Victor turned toward Andre. Your uncle did not tell you. Andre swallowed. He served. That's enough. For him, maybe. Not for the dead man. Mikhail laughed. Sergei did not. Malcolm glanced toward the phone on the counter. His own device lay face up beside the register, untouched because Victor assumed every useful call had already been prevented by the dead camera and the man outside. There was no safe way to dial 911 without provoking Mikhail. But there was another kind of call, one Victor might permit because arrogant men liked forcing ordinary routines to continue under their control. The next customer will come at 6, Malcolm said. Victor checked his watch. Cancel him. Phone is there. Victor followed his gaze. Use speaker. Malcolm picked up the phone slowly. He opened his appointment list, though he knew the number he needed. Detective Walker answered with her professional greeting. Hayes Son, Malcolm said. Need to move the Brooks appointment. There was a pause. Walker knew there was no client named Brooks in his book. Malcolm had once told her, during a neighborhood emergency training meeting, that his old team used phrases built from ordinary logistics. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that sounded like a plea. Dante had favored one line whenever an extraction route was compromised. The tide is low, and the second boat is late. What time? Walker asked. 6:30, Malcolm said. Tell Mr. Brooks the tide is low, and his second chair's running late. Across the room, Sergei's head lifted. Walker did not change her tone. Does he still want the usual? Everybody does. How many ahead of him? Malcolm looked into the wall mirror and counted the civilians, not the gunmen. 6. Any children? One needs his first clean line behind the ear. Jamal had already had dozens of haircuts. Walker understood. One child. I'll update the appointment, she said. Keep the line open if you can. Victor ended the call with his thumb. Cute. Malcolm set the phone down. Customer service. But Sergei was staring at him with a new kind of alarm. He had recognized the phrase, not from Malcolm's shop, but from a transcript buried in Alexei's case. The tide is low. The second boat is late. Words transmitted minutes before the witness vanished from the Orlov route. He warned someone, Sergei said. Victor's face hardened. He called a barber appointment. No, he built a count. Mikhail shoved Andre toward the center of the room. Then we cut the count. He pulled a compact handgun from beneath his jacket. The mother gasped. Jamal stopped crying altogether, fear stealing even that sound. Mr. Ellis gripped the arms of his chair. Bernard whispered a prayer. Malcolm did not look at the gun. He looked at Mikhail's reflection. A man became more dangerous when a weapon entered his hand, but also more readable. Mikhail wanted Victor to approve. Victor wanted Malcolm to react. Sergei wanted everyone to leave before old history repeated itself. 3 desires, none aligned. Put it away, Victor said. Mikhail hesitated. That hesitation mattered. It meant Victor's authority was not absolute under fear. Malcolm stored the fact beside every angle, every breath, every object out of place. Outside, Detective Renee Walker was already moving. Walker was 3 blocks away when Malcolm's call reached her. She had been sitting in an unmarked sedan across from the pharmacy, reviewing reports that all described the same fear without naming the same men. The name Brooks made her sit upright. The tide phrase made her start the engine. The count told her what kind of scene she was approaching. 6 civilians, 1 child, compromised exit, hostile control. She radioed for a quiet perimeter, emphasized no sirens, and told dispatch the front of Hayes Son could not become a wall of uniforms. The people inside needed options, not a spectacle. She called Bernard's daughter and confirmed that the camera feed had gone dark at 5:12. She called the utility company and learned there had been no outage. Then she called Calvin Price. His phone rang from somewhere near the alley, close enough that Walker heard the faint vibration before it went to voicemail. She parked without blocking the street and approached on foot through the church lot. Inside the shop, Victor ordered everyone moved away from the windows. Mikhail dragged the waiting bench 6 feet toward the center, forcing Leo to stand. The movement almost exposed the drive. It slid inside Leo's coat and struck a button with a small plastic click. Sergei heard it. Malcolm saw his head turn. "Coat's off," Sergei said. Leo backed away. "Why?" "Because it is warm." "I get cold." Mikhail crossed toward him. Then shiver. Andrei moved first. He picked up the water pitcher from beside the coffee pot and let it slip. It shattered across the tile, sending water beneath the chairs and glass toward Mikhail's shoes. Everyone looked down. In that second, Leo reached beneath his coat and pushed the drive through the tear in the waiting bench. It disappeared into the upholstery. Mikhail slapped Andrei hard enough to knock him against the counter. Malcolm took one step. The gun swung toward him. "Stay," Mikhail said. Malcolm stopped. Andrei lifted his head. Blood shone at the corner of his lip, but his eyes found Malcolm's in the mirror. That was brave, Malcolm thought. This time, useful too. Sergei searched Leo and found nothing. He removed the coat, checked every pocket, then looked under the chairs. Viktor watched Malcolm instead. He had begun to understand that the room responded to the barber even when the barber barely moved. Tasha shifted when Malcolm shifted. Andrei breathed when Malcolm told him to breathe. "Mister," Ellis held still because Malcolm had looked at him. Leo had hidden something during a distraction Andrei created without instruction. Control was flowing beneath Viktor's commands like water under a locked door. "Separate them," Viktor said. Mikhail pulled Andrei toward the third chair and forced him down. Sergei moved Leo beside the back sink. Tasha and Jamal were placed near the supply cabinet, where the narrow mirror still caught the alley door. Mr. Ellis and Bernard remained in the first two chairs. Malcolm was ordered to stand behind his own station, hands visible. The positions were meant to isolate. Instead, they gave Malcolm a clearer map. The third chair's hydraulic base was heavy enough to shield Andrei's lower body. Tasha could reach the back hall in 4 steps if the path opened. Mr. Ellis had a bad left knee but strong hands. Bernard wore hearing aids and could miss a quiet instruction, so Malcolm would need visual signals. Leo was nearest the basement stairs, but panic made him the least reliable mover. Mikhail stayed between Andrei and the front door. Sergei guarded the center. Viktor moved wherever attention felt strongest. Malcolm remembered another enclosed space, another group waiting for one wrong sound to become chaos. The memory came not as a full picture, but in fragments. Diesel under salt air, a steel corridor sweating with heat. Dante's gloved hand tapping twice against Malcolm's shoulder, a witness whose breath had become so fast she could no longer hear instructions. Back then, Malcolm had lowered his voice instead of raising it. He had made the frightened woman look at one small bolt on the bulkhead and count her breaths against it. Rescue was not dragging someone through danger. Rescue began by giving fear a task small enough to obey. He looked at Jamal. The boy's eyes were fixed on the gun. "Jamal," Malcolm said. Viktor turned. "No talking." Malcolm ignored him. "Remember the number on the red guard?" Jamal's chin trembled. 2. "Good. Find 2 red things without moving your head." The boy blinked. His eyes shifted to the cape hanging near the wall, then to the red handle on the broom. His breathing slowed by a fraction. Viktor walked to Malcolm. "You think this is a classroom?" "No. I think he is 8. For a second, Viktor looked almost embarrassed by the simplicity of the answer. Then he struck Malcolm in the stomach. Malcolm folded against the counter, caught himself, and stayed upright. Andrei strained against Mikhail's hand. "Stop touching him." Viktor turned toward the boy. "He is teaching you restraint because he knows what rage costs. Do you know why? Because you're scared of him." Mikhail pressed the barrel against the side of Andrei's chair. Tasha covered Jamal's ears. Viktor's face went still. "Your uncle's friend died because Raven 2 chose the witness over his own man." "That is not what happened," Malcolm said. It was the first time his voice carried weight beyond calm. Viktor smiled. "Then tell them." The shop waited. Malcolm had spent 2 decades refusing to turn Dante's death into a story polished for other people's understanding. The mission had happened at night on a commercial vessel moving through contested water under false registration. A financial courier had agreed to testify against the Orlov route, then learned that her handlers had been compromised. Malcolm's team was sent to remove her without endangering the civilian crew. They reached her. They secured the evidence. They began moving toward extraction when a fire broke out below deck. Not an accident, but a diversion meant to trap the witness in smoke. Dante found 2 civilian engineers locked behind a warped steel door. The clean route was closing. The witness was terrified. The team could not remain together and still get everyone out. Dante looked at Malcolm and said, "Raven 2, take the living forward." Malcolm argued for 4 seconds. 4 seconds he still replayed. Dante cut him off. "That is the job." Malcolm moved the witness. Dante went for the engineers. A secondary blast collapsed part of the passage before he returned. The engineers survived because he reached them. Dante did not. The mission succeeded in every way official language measured success. The witness testified. Alexei Orlov went into federal custody. An international route collapsed. Malcolm came home with Dante's blood on one sleeve and a sentence in his head that would not release him. Take the living forward. He left the teams a year later, not because he feared another mission, but because he had begun entering every room looking for the man he had failed to bring back. That kind of grief could disguise itself as discipline until it endangered everyone nearby. He did not tell the whole memory in the shop. He gave Viktor only what mattered. Dante chose 2 civilians, Malcolm said. I chose the witness. Everybody living got home except the man who made both choices possible. Viktor tilted his head. And you call that victory? No. Failure? No. What then? Cost. Sergei looked away. Mikhail did not understand. Andrei did. For the first time, he saw that Malcolm's silence about the photograph had never been shame about service. It was respect for a debt too heavy to use as decoration. Viktor studied Malcolm, searching for the guilt he could weaponize. You promised yourself you would never bring war here. Malcolm's eyes hardened. I didn't bring you. The words seemed to reduce Viktor inside his own suit. Outside, Walker reached the rear of the churchyard and found the coal door blocked by a metal storage rack. The rack had been dragged from the shared utility passage. Its wheels left pale tracks through plaster dust. Beside it lay a small screwdriver with a blue handle, the kind Calvin used in his repair shop. Walker photographed the scene before touching anything. Then she heard movement behind a dumpster and found Calvin crouched with both hands over his head. Don't shoot, he whispered. I am not holding a gun on you. Calvin looked up, confused by the absence of drama. Walker crouched several feet away. How many inside? Viktor, Sergei, Mikhail, another man out front. Weapons? I saw 2. Camera. Calvin shut his eyes. Calvin. They took my daughter. Walker stayed still. Where is she? With her mother in Virginia now. They let her go this morning after I gave them access. What access? The camera login, utility passage, basement layout. They made me search Malcolm's station last night. The silver razor case? Calvin stared at her. How do you know? I don't. You just told me. His face collapsed. They said a bookkeeper had hidden something in the shop. I moved the case. I put everything back. I swear I didn't find anything. Walker recorded the statement on her phone. Did you cut the live camera? They did it through my shop, but the recorder at Malcolm's register is local. Audio too. I didn't tell them. That mattered. Evidence might still be building inside. Walker moved Calvin behind the church wall and directed an officer to secure him as both witness and suspect. Coercion would be investigated later. Right now, Calvin had opened a door that put 6 civilians and a child at risk. Fear explained his choices, but it did not erase them. She studied the rear wall of Hayes Son. The alley door had no window. The basement coal door was blocked, but not locked from inside. A direct entry could trigger Mikhail before officers reached Andrei. The front man had a clear view of uniforms approaching from either direction. Walker needed Malcolm to create a shift, not a fight, something that moved Viktor's attention and the civilians at the same time. Her phone buzzed with a text from dispatch. Bernard's daughter had provided the original camera app credentials. The feed was offline, but a cached audio channel flickered every few seconds. Walker put in an earbud. At first she heard only hum, scraping furniture, and Victor's voice asking about the drive. Then Malcolm spoke. "Coffee's burning." Nobody answered. "Let me turn it off." Victor said, "Stay where you are." Malcolm looked at the coffee pot in the wall mirror. Its glass carafe had been empty for an hour. The heating plate, however, sat on the same circuit as the rear work lights. If Andre switched the power strip beneath the third chair with his heel, those lights would blink before the breakers settled. One blink was meaningless. 2 blinks had been the shop signal for someone at the alley door since Andre was 12 and kept forgetting his key. Andre followed Malcolm's eyes. His foot moved an inch. Mikhail noticed. "What are you doing?" "My leg's asleep." "Then wake it." He kicked the chair base. Andre flinched, but his heel reached the switch. The rear lights went dark, returned, went dark again, then held. Outside, Walker saw 2 pale flashes leak through the alley doorframe. A signal. Not an invitation to enter. A confirmation that Malcolm knew she was near. Victor spun toward the lights. "What was that?" "Old wiring," Malcolm said. Sergei looked at the power strip, then at Andre. No, it was him. Mikhail grabbed Andre by the throat and hauled him out of the chair. Tasha cried out. Jamal screamed for Malcolm. The room reached its most dangerous point, not when the gun appeared, but when Victor realized Malcolm had influenced a person he thought he controlled. Fear made Victor abandon the search pattern. He seized Andre by the back of his hoodie and dragged him beside the photograph. "You built a rescue," Victor demanded. "Inside my room." Malcolm's voice stayed low. "It was never your room." Victor struck Andre with the back of his hand. Malcolm's body moved before thought, one step toward them. Sergei raised his weapon. Mikhail turned his own gun toward Tasha and Jamal. Malcolm stopped again. That stop cost him more than the blows. Andre saw it. He saw his uncle choose the child over pride, the whole room over one clean act of rage. He also saw Victor misread it as surrender. "On your knees," Victor said. Malcolm lowered himself. "Hands behind your head." He obeyed. Victor forced Andre to stand in front of him, one arm locked across the boy's chest. "Now tell the detective outside to leave." "I don't have a line to her." "You made one before." "Then you know she won't leave." Victor pulled Andre closer. "She will if you tell her the boy dies first." Malcolm looked at Andre. The boy's terror was real. So was his attention. He was watching the mirrors, just as Malcolm had taught him during busy Saturdays when 4 customers spoke at once. Andre saw Mikhail behind Tasha. He saw Sergei near the front. He saw Leo standing by the sink, eyes fixed on the torn waiting bench. Victor followed Andre's gaze and finally understood. "The bench," he said. Leo bolted toward it. Mikhail caught him by the coat and slammed him against the floor. The torn upholstery ripped wider. The black drive slid out, bounced once on the wet tile, and stopped beneath Malcolm's chair. Every person in the shop looked at it. For one suspended second, the object that had caused all of the fear seemed too small to justify any of it. Then Mikhail moved. Andre drove his heel down on Victor's polished shoe and threw his weight sideways. Victor lost his grip but did not release him. Sergei shouted. Tasha pulled Jamal behind the supply cabinet. Mr. Ellis shoved Bernard's chair, creating a barrier between Mikhail and the child. Leo crawled toward the bench instead of the drive, pure panic choosing the familiar hiding place. Malcolm did not reach for the weapon, the drive, or Victor. He reached for the hydraulic lever on his barber chair. The chair dropped and rotated, its heavy back swinging between Mikhail and Andre. Mikhail collided with it, his gun hand knocked wide. The weapon discharged into the ceiling. Plaster burst down. The sound erased thought from everyone except Malcolm. "Back hall," he shouted. Tasha moved with Jamal. Bernard pushed himself from the chair. Mr. Ellis caught his arm. The narrow path between the supply cabinet and rear sink opened because Malcolm had been arranging towels, carts, and bodies toward it for 20 minutes, without Victor seeing a pattern. Sergei raised his weapon toward Malcolm, then hesitated because Andre crossed the line in the mirror. Malcolm saw the hesitation and drove the wheeled tool cart into Sergei's knees. Sergei fell against the waiting bench, not injured badly, but separated from his aim. Mikhail recovered and swung toward the fleeing civilians. Andre grabbed a barber cape and snapped it across Mikhail's face. It was not a trained move. It was a terrified boy using the nearest thing available. Mikhail tore through it and caught Andre by the arm. Malcolm was there before the second pull. He trapped Mikhail's wrist against the chrome chair back and turned the gun away from every person in the room. The movement was compact, ugly, and over in a breath. Mikhail struck him twice. Malcolm absorbed one blow, avoided the next, and used the chair's weight to force Mikhail down. He did not break the arm. He did not strike the throat. He held the weapon hand where it could harm no one and shouted, "Andre, go!" Andre did not go. He kicked the loose gun under the counter, then ran after Tasha and Jamal. Viktor released him only because he had seen the drive under Malcolm's chair. He lunged for it, snatched it, and headed toward the front door. The man outside opened the door at the first gunshot. Walker's team moved at the same moment, but the front enforcer saw them and fired toward the street. Officers took cover. The door slammed again. Viktor found the route blocked by his own perimeter collapsing. "Alley!" he shouted. Sergei, climbing from the bench, looked toward the narrow mirror and saw Walker's silhouette outside the rear wall. "No." Viktor grabbed Leo from the floor and pulled him against his chest. "Then he comes with us." Leo made a sound like air leaving a punctured tire. The drive remained in Viktor's fist. Malcolm released Mikhail only after Mr. Ellis kicked the fallen weapon farther beneath the counter. Mikhail staggered up and reached for the straight razors on the station. His hand went to the silver case. The case was now facing Hinjin. Mikhail paused because Viktor's men had been told the drive might be hidden there. Malcolm saw the confusion. So did Sergei. "You searched this before," Malcolm said. No one answered. "Someone told you the station mattered. Someone who put the case back wrong." Viktor dragged Leo toward the alley door. "We do not have time for this." But Malcolm was not speaking to Viktor. He was speaking toward the hidden recorder and the officers listening to the broken audio. Calvin Price accessed the station. Calvin Price accessed the cameras. Local recorder under register remained active. Mikhail looked toward the register. That look confirmed everything. He raised the silver case to smash the recorder beneath the counter. Malcolm grabbed the barber cape still tangled around his forearm and yanked the cart sideways. Bottles, guards, combs, and the case scattered across the wet tile. Mikhail slipped, caught himself on the counter, and lost the 2 seconds he needed. Walker heard Malcolm's words through a burst of static. Recorder confirmed. She told the evidence officer, "Price is the access point. Preserve the system." The crisis now had 2 fronts: save the people and preserve the proof that would prevent Viktor's crew from simply being replaced by another collection team next month. Viktor reached the alley door and pulled it open. Walker stood beyond the threshold behind the brick angle, weapon lowered but ready, 2 officers farther back. "Police," she called. "Let Leo go. Nobody needs another shot." Viktor pressed a gun beneath Leo's jaw. "Back away." Walker did not crowd the doorway. "You have nowhere clean to move." "You think I need clean?" "No. Malcolm does. That's why you're still alive." Viktor's eyes flashed toward Malcolm. Walker had named the restraint he wanted to interpret as weakness. Behind Malcolm, Sergei had recovered his weapon. Mikhail stood near the register, bleeding from one eyebrow, rage burning through his fear. Andre, Tasha, Jamal, Mr. Ellis, and Bernard had reached the back hall but not the basement. The basement door was still blocked from outside, and the restroom offered no real cover. The civilians were grouped in a narrow space with no exit. Malcolm had not completed the rescue. He had only changed its shape. Viktor smiled because he sensed that. "Raven 2, he said. "You always move the living forward. What happens when forward is closed?" The old mission returned with brutal clarity. Smoke in a steel corridor. The witness refusing to move. Dante turning back. A rope collapsing behind them. Malcolm heard Dante's voice as memory, not ghost. The job is not the door. The job is the living. He looked around the barbershop he knew completely. Forward was not one direction. The mirrors created lines that walls did not. The chairs created barriers that commands did not. The basement was blocked, but the old laundry chute beside the supply cabinet opened into the church storage room next door after a renovation had removed its lower grate. Andre had crawled through it once at age 13 and gotten stuck at the shoulders. Jamal was small enough. Tasha might fit if she turned sideways. Bernard and Mr. Ellis would not. 2 rescue groups, not one. Malcolm lifted his left hand where Andre could see it in the narrow mirror and touched 2 fingers to his own shoulder. The old shop signal meant split the waiting list. Andre's eyes widened. Then he looked toward the laundry panel. He understood. Andre guided Tasha and Jamal toward the supply cabinet while keeping his body between them and the shop. The laundry panel was painted the same beige as the wall and half hidden by stacked capes. He moved one bundle aside with his foot. Jamal saw the square outline and looked to Malcolm in the mirror. 2 red things, Malcolm told him. The boy nodded, though tears ran down his face. Now 1 brave thing. Tasha opened the panel. A dark wooden passage waited beyond it. Jamal recoiled. She whispered into his ear, then helped him climb through. Andre held the panel while the child disappeared into the wall. A second later came the muffled scrape of small shoes reaching the sloped section toward the church room. Mikhail heard it. He turned away from the register and charged toward the back hall. Malcolm drove his shoulder into the second barber chair and sent it rolling across Mikhail's path. The chair struck the doorframe, narrowing the passage. Mikhail slammed it aside, but Bernard and Mr. Ellis had already braced the other side with their weight. 2 old men who had spent the evening appearing helpless now became a living lock. "Move!" Mikhail shouted. Mr. Ellis looked through the gap. "Appointment only." Mikhail raised his empty hand to strike him. Andre pulled Tasha into the laundry opening behind Jamal. Her shoulder caught. Panic filled her face. "Turn left," Malcolm said. "Breathe out." She did. The space accepted her. Andre shoved the panel closed just as Mikhail broke past the chair. Mikhail caught Andre by the hoodie and threw him against the sink. Malcolm crossed the room, but Sergei's gun tracked him. "Stop," Sergei said. Malcolm stopped between the mirrors. Sergei's face had changed. The confidence was gone, but something steadier had replaced it. He had watched Malcolm move civilians instead of chasing Viktor. He had watched him spare Mikhail when a more violent man would have taken revenge. Sergei understood at last that the old file had described the wrong danger. Raven 2 was not feared because he could enter a room. He was feared because once inside, he could decide what mattered and refuse every distraction. "You can still walk out," Malcolm told him, "with police outside. Alive, hands visible." Viktor tightened his hold on Leo. "Do not listen to him." Sergei glanced toward the photograph. Dante's hand rested under Malcolm's in the faded image. The men in that picture looked exhausted, not triumphant. Sergei lowered his weapon by 1 inch. Mikhail saw it and shouted, "Coward!" He grabbed Andre around the throat and pulled him in front of his body. The boy's cracked phone lay near the broom closet, screen still glowing beneath a web of glass. On it, an emergency call Andre had triggered before the phone was thrown remained connected. Dispatch had been listening to fragments for nearly 20 minutes. Walker heard Mikhail threaten the boy. "Sergei," she called from the alley, using the name Calvin had supplied. "This ends with choices, not loyalty. Put the weapon down." Sergei looked toward Viktor. "She knows us." "She knows nothing," Viktor snapped. "She knows enough." Mikhail pressed a forearm against Andre's windpipe. "Back up, Malcolm." Malcolm did not move. Andre's eyes found the long mirror. He was frightened, breath restricted, one hand trapped. His free hand rested against the sink where a jar of blue disinfectant stood beside clean combs. Malcolm gave no signal. A rescue depended on the person at risk understanding what not to do as much as what to do. Andre waited. Viktor began backing into the alley with Leo. Walker matched him by giving space, keeping her voice level. "Let the accountant return to the shop. He comes with me. He cannot help you. He helps your officers hesitate. They are already hesitating. That is why you are talking." For the first time, Viktor looked beyond her and saw how completely the block had changed. Uniformed officers held distant corners. The street was empty of traffic. Paramedics waited behind cover. Nobody rushed him. Nobody offered the chaos he needed. Walker had built a patient perimeter around Malcolm's patient room. Viktor looked down at the drive in his fist. "This buys me a road." "No," Walker said. It buys evidence. He squeezed it as if he could crush what it contained. The casing flexed but held. Inside, Mikhail's grip shifted on Andrei. The boy used the movement to breathe. Sergei looked at the fallen weapon beneath the counter, then at Malcolm. "I remember your face," Sergei said. "Not from the doc photo. Another image. The witness leaving federal court. You were behind her." Malcolm said nothing. "She looked back at you. She was checking for someone." "Dante?" "Yes." Sergei lowered his gun farther. "You told her he was coming." "I told her to keep moving." The answer carried 20 years of guilt. Sergei heard it and understood that Viktor's taunts had not weakened Malcolm. They had reminded him what hesitation cost. Mikhail did not understand any of it. He tightened his arm and reached for a razor from the open case with his other hand. Andrei grabbed the disinfectant jar and threw it, not at Mikhail, but at the long mirror. The jar struck glass. The mirror cracked in a white star and dropped glittering pieces across the counter. Mikhail flinched toward the sound. Malcolm moved into the gap, seized Andrei by the shoulder, and pulled him down behind the sink as Sergei fired once. The shot hit the ceiling because Sergei had aimed away at the last instant. Mikhail stumbled backward. Andrei crawled through the gap beside the chair toward Mr. Ellis. Malcolm remained between him and Mikhail. "Enough," Sergei said. Mikhail turned on him. "You missed." "No." Sergei set his gun on the floor and raised both hands. "I chose." Walker saw the movement through the alley doorway. "One surrendering," she called to her team. Viktor heard and cursed Sergei. The curse was raw, stripped of polish. His organization had been built on the belief that fear moved downward. Now fear was returning up the chain. Mikhail lunged for Sergei's abandoned gun. Malcolm kicked the base of the third chair. It rotated into Mikhail's knees and knocked him across the wet tile. Mr. Ellis pushed Andrei behind the back wall. Bernard pulled the basement door shut, adding another layer between the boy and danger, even though the exit beyond remained blocked. Mikhail rose with a shard of broken mirror in his hand, his own reflection fragmented around him. Eye, jaw, teeth, all separated by cracks. He charged Malcolm. Malcolm stepped aside and guided Mikhail's momentum into the padded chair. The shard sliced upholstery instead of skin. Mikhail swung again. Malcolm caught his forearm with both hands, pinned it against the chair back, and held until Sergei kicked the glass away. For a moment, Malcolm and Sergei looked at each other over Mikhail's struggling body. Old enemies were the wrong description. They were two men standing on opposite sides of choices made long ago. Sergei had served a criminal family. Malcolm had broken one of its routes. Yet in that second, both chose the living person nearest them over the command of the man in the alley. Officers entered through the front after securing the perimeter man. Walker's voice carried from the rear. "Hands! Keep them visible!" Sergei stepped away and knelt. Malcolm released Mikhail only when two officers reached the chair and restrained him. Mikhail cursed Malcolm, the shop, Sergei, and every mirror that had hidden movement from him. Malcolm did not answer. Andrei came through the basement doorway and wrapped both arms around his uncle from behind. Malcolm covered the boy's hands with one of his own, but his eyes stayed on the alley. The rescue was not complete. Viktor still held Leo. Walker backed toward the churchyard, giving Viktor the illusion of movement. Leo's knees trembled so violently he could barely walk. The gun beneath his jaw forced his chin upward. The drive remained in Viktor's other hand. "Vehicle," Viktor demanded. "No," Walker said. "Then he dies." "Not for a drive you cannot use." Viktor smiled without humor. "You think this is about files?" "It is about control," Malcolm said from the doorway. Walker did not turn. She had not asked him to approach, but she understood why he had. Viktor's attention belonged to Malcolm more completely than to any officer. That attention could be a weapon or an exit. Viktor pulled Leo tighter. "Stay inside." Malcolm stopped at the threshold, hands open. "You came into my shop to prove everybody watched you." "They did." "No, they watched what you were afraid of." Viktor's gaze flicked toward the photograph visible through the cracked mirrors. "I am not afraid of a picture." "You stepped back from it." The words struck because they were true, and because every surviving witness had seen it. Viktor had built his identity around never yielding space. One half step had become a wound he could not conceal. He aimed the gun away from Leo for a fraction of a second, toward Malcolm. Walker shifted. Leo collapsed his weight without warning. He did not fight like a trained man. He simply became too heavy to hold. Viktor's arm dropped with him. Malcolm moved forward and pulled Leo behind the brick edge as Walker closed the distance. Viktor fired once. The shot struck the metal alley door and rang through the shop. Officers surrounded him before he could turn the gun again. "Drop it," Walker ordered. Viktor looked at Malcolm. In his face was the final calculation of a man who had lost control, but still hoped to provoke revenge. If Malcolm charged, if he struck him, if the former SEAL became the violent legend Viktor wanted to expose, then perhaps the humiliation could be rewritten. Perhaps Viktor could leave the scene as the man who unmasked a killer, rather than the man who mistook restraint for weakness. Malcolm stayed beside Leo. "Take care of him," he told the paramedics. Viktor's gun lowered. An officer removed it. Walker took the drive from his hand, placed it in an evidence bag, and read him his rights while the first blue lights finally washed across the brick walls. Viktor kept staring at Malcolm. "You could have ended me." Malcolm looked through the alley door at Andre, the customers, and the broken shop. "That was never the job." Walker heard the answer. So did Sergei as officers led him through the front. His head bowed when he passed the photograph. The rest came in layers. Paramedics treated Andre's throat and split lip, then found Tasha and Jamal shaken but safe in the church storage room. Jamal held up 2 fingers and said he had found 2 red things and 1 brave thing. Malcolm knelt despite his ribs and told him the brave thing had been listening to his mother. Mr. Ellis complained about the ambulance. Bernard cried when his daughter answered, and Leo gave Walker his first full account from beneath a blanket on the curb. Evidence technicians preserved the bullet marks, cracked mirror, broken phone, torn bench, local recorder, and silver razor case. The recorder captured Viktor's demands, Mikhail's threats, Sergei's recognition of Raven 2, and Malcolm identifying the camera leak. Andre's emergency call and the camera timestamps supported it. The drive held extortion ledgers, payment schedules, threatened owners, and communications tying Viktor's crew to businesses across 3 counties. Before sunrise, Calvin admitted that threats against his daughter had forced him to provide camera credentials, the utility map, and access to Malcolm's station. He had searched the silver case and returned it backward, but had hidden the existence of the local recorder. Walker told him pressure explained his choice without erasing the people he trapped. His cooperation and coercion would matter in court, but so would the door he opened. Viktor, Mikhail, Sergei, and the outside enforcer were charged as the evidence connected them to months of intimidation. Sergei's cooperation helped officers locate Pavel alive and move him into protection. Leo agreed to testify. Shop owners who had once whispered about envelopes began giving dates and names on record. The network had depended on each victim believing he stood alone. Hayes and Son destroyed that lie. At dawn, Malcolm and Andre stood inside the ruined shop. Plaster and mirror glass covered the floor. The waiting bench gaped open, and sunlight struck the Navy photograph. Andre, a bandage on his lips, said, "You really were Raven 2. Malcolm answered, "I was one man in a team." When Andre asked why he had never explained, Malcolm said old work could become a costume if a man talked about it too much. He told Andre that Dante had taught him the hardest part of courage. Anger came easily when someone was threatened, but choosing what kept people alive was harder. Andre asked whether Malcolm had wanted to hurt Viktor. "For a second," Malcolm admitted. "What stopped you?" "Everybody who needed me to do something else." Andre confessed he had been scared. Malcolm said fear and bravery often arrived together. Andre found Viktor's wet $20 bill on the tile. Malcolm smoothed it and placed it in the jar that paid for free back-to-school haircuts. "Make it useful," he said. The shop closed for 3 weeks while neighbors repaired walls, cameras, chairs, and the scarred waiting bench. Calvin's store remained shut while his case moved forward. Malcolm visited him once. Calvin apologized for putting Andre in danger. Malcolm did not offer easy forgiveness. He told him to tell the truth completely, accept what it cost, and live differently afterward. When Hayes and Son reopened, a line formed before 7. Mr. Ellis claimed the first chair. Bernard exaggerated his role in the rescue. and Jamal asked Andre for the red number 2 guard. Andre's hands shook when the clippers started. Malcolm met his eyes in the mirror and said, "Breathe." Andre smiled. Always teaching. Always. The old photograph hung in a new frame beside the repaired mirror, the faded Raven 2 label still visible. Beneath it, Malcolm mounted Dante Brooks's challenge coin instead of returning it to a drawer. When Andre asked what it meant, Malcolm touched the edge and said, "Take the living forward." The mirror kept a thin sealed seam. Malcolm preferred it that way. A perfect mirror showed a room. A scarred one showed what the room had survived. Walker arrived with her father and reported that Viktor had been denied bail. Mikhail faced added charges. Sergei was cooperating, and the drive had opened investigations across 3 counties. She told Malcolm he had built a case while guns were on his family. He answered that he kept people alive, and the recorder built the case. Walker reminded him that he had identified the leak, preserved the drive, and given her a hostage count in 12 words. Malcolm poured coffee. "You listened. That is also the job." Andre called him to check a line. In the mirror, Malcolm saw the whole shop. Walker's father under a cape, Jamal reading, Mr. Ellis near the coffee, Tasha talking to Bernard, the alley slice, the camera light, and the silver razor case facing the proper direction. The habits remained, but they no longer belonged only to war. Malcolm adjusted one edge and handed the clippers back. "Finish it." People outside told the story through gunshots, broken glass, and the chair that moved at the right second. The truth was quieter. Malcolm had won when he accepted humiliation without surrendering his timing, counted civilians instead of enemies, noticed a backward razor case, trusted Andre to be brave without becoming reckless, and chose evidence over revenge. The photograph did not make him invincible. It showed that he understood how fragile people were in trapped rooms. Dante's coin did not erase failure. It gave failure a direction. The scar in the mirror caught the light and became part of what everyone saw. They mocked him because they saw a black barber they could break. By sunrise, Viktor Orlov understood that the old photo on Malcolm Hayes' wall was not nostalgia. It was a warning. They mocked him because they saw a black barber they could break. By sunrise, Viktor Orlov understood that the old photo on Malcolm Hayes' wall was not nostalgia. It was a warning.